had already happened, actually, I now realise, but it's probably an illustration of why Caroline Criado-Perez's book, Invisible Women, is so important. She'd already launched her campaign to have a statue of the suffragist Millicent Fawcett put in Trafalgar Square when we were at the Edinburgh Festival. Parliament Square, I beg your pardon. Caroline's here, as you can tell. We were at the Edinburgh Festival last summer, and one of my girls just said to me, apropos nothing in particular, because like London, there are some magnificent statues and indeed some sort of columns in the garden squares of Edinburgh. One of my girls just said to me and her mum, why aren't there any statues of women? And don't hate me, Caroline, I found myself framing an answer that would have boiled down to suggesting that they hadn't done much.
Oh dear.
I know. And I'm on your team. So it's an illustration.
Well, apparently not.
Well, because I can acknowledge how wrong that was.
Yeah.
But it is, I mention it, and I'm embarrassed. I'm a little bit ashamed to mention it, because it illustrates the height of the mountain that you're seeking to climb.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's not really surprising, because the reality is that women have been written out of history. And so, there are so many examples that we have already discovered. So God knows how many more there are to discover. And as a result, and part of it is that we don't commemorate them. And so it's not really surprising that you might have thought, well, that's because women were so subjugated they hadn't been able to achieve anything. I mean, arguably there should be more statues of women than of men if you're going to sort of look at the subjugation argument, because the women who did manage to succeed were therefore so much more impressive.
Yes, and it is the phrase I used when I was telling my listeners that you were going to be joining us later was hiding in plain sight. These are simply observable facts that we haven't really registered, and the statues are barely the tip of the iceberg in the context of it's a statistical compendium, your book, isn't it? I mean, it's fact after fact after fact after fact, which is probably why a lot of
that makes it sound very boring.
No, I haven't finished. Because I mean, it could be shock after shock after shock, or twist after twist, if you prefer, if you want.
I do prefer.
But the point is that this infuriates people. I mean, you were the campaigner who led the calls for a woman to be put on banknotes, and it led to toxicity on social media on a scale that and I'm no stranger to toxicity on social media, but compared to what people like you put up with, and my experience is a walk in the park. Why does it get up so many noses? Simple illustration of provable fact with regard to what you call subjugation or the writing out of women.
Well, so I mean, I think that there's a number of things going on.
Of course.
I think that part of it is, the heart of it is fear. So the men who would send me, explicit rape and death threats for campaigning for a female historical figure on a banknote are clearly scared of what that represents for them. We've kind of challenged what it means to be a woman to a certain extent, although obviously we're much further to go. But along with that, we needed to challenge what it means to be a man, and we haven't really redefined that in the same way. And so when you have women making incursions, however minor, into the public sphere that is still defined as a male space, boys being brought up to think, actually, we're going to be the ones who are leaders, we're going to be the ones who are going to have our voices listened to. It's very threatening to, I think, their sense of self. So, that's part of it. But I think it's also, one of the men, this man didn't send me a rape or death threat, but he got in touch with me outraged about the banknotes campaign to say, but women are everywhere now. And, in this outraged tone of voice.
Yes.
And clearly, by the fact that I was having to campaign for one female historical figure out of 4 banknotes, no, we aren't. But I think it's very, very telling that, that's what he felt. Yes. He was experiencing this minor incursion of women into the public space as women taking over. And that's one of the things that I kind of look at in the book, is that we are so used to seeing men as the default human that when women are there, it is shocking. It is seen as a norm violation, and therefore it feels like there are far more women than there actually are.
And that default human phrase is incredibly powerful, because it just means that the world is designed to accommodate men, and women have to fit into the mould that has been made for men.
Yes.
One of the more telling
and
examples.
Not fit in.
No, well, of course. And one of the more telling examples, oddly though it will sound at first glance, is crash test dummies.
Yes. So basically, for decades, cars have been designed using a crash test dummy that is based on the 50th percentile male, as if the average man is the average human.
Sure.
And as a result, women are
But this
basically
will affect
unsafe.
everything. This will affect where the steering wheel hits you, where on your
Exactly.
body, how heavy you sit in your seat. All of this. So the cars are designed to protect
women
the 50th
are
percentile.
thrown much further forward than men because of the backs of the seat, because the seats are too firm. Women have to sit what's called too far forward in order to reach the pedals. Of course, you could reframe that and say it's actually the pedals that are too far away, or the dashboard is too high.
Yes.
But because of all of this, women have to sit in what's called an out of position driving position, and as a result, they are 47% more likely to be seriously injured. And we're talking life-changing injuries here,
But
and
that number should be
17%
the
more
end.
likely to die.
Good grief.
And so sort of belatedly, regulators have realised that women exist, so well done, regulators. But unfortunately, they still haven't come round to the fact that women are not just smaller men. Women differ from men in a bunch of ways that aren't about being smaller, like, for example, pelvises being
Yes.
different, having boobs, for example,
Yes.
which seatbelts don't accommodate, pregnant women. There still isn't a seatbelt to accommodate pregnancy, and the sort of main cause of fetal death from trauma is in fact car crashes.
Is that right?
So this is a really
Huge
big
issue.
deal.
But it should be over the minute you point it out, and yet it isn't. It feels as if you're just scratching at the surface
car
of
crashes
reaction.
is so odd because in a lot of areas it feels like it's just an overlooking. Like when Apple introduced its comprehensive health app
Yes.
and forgot to include a menstrual tracker.
Yes.
That's
How can
clearly,
that happen?
Well, I mean, that's just not enough women in your design team, because if there had been enough women...
There'd been one woman. She might have been shouted down, or
or embarrassed to point it
I'm
out.
not going to be the woman who sits here saying periods.
Right,
Yes,
exactly.
okay.
So it's part. I mean, I don't know how many women. Maybe there were no women, but
sure.
I'm not sure that one woman would have been able to do it. But when it comes to cars, the fact that they did belatedly realise. But in the EU, for example, the regulatory tests, there are 5 regulatory tests. In only one test is this quote unquote female dummy that's actually just a scaled down male dummy used,
Yes.
and it's only in the passenger seat. So I don't know how you explain that, really, because
Well,
that's
it's your
not
job.
forgetting that women exist. Don't be so rude. I'm pointing it out. That my job's to complain.
Oh, fair enough. pot kettle. Let me give you an example, and indeed everybody arguing or listening an example of what you're up against. Here is a text that I think has been sent in good faith while you've been here. Women are leading our country. PM, Queen, Leader of Scottish Parliament. I thought your journalism was fact-based. So you point out that cars are designed to make men more safe than women. You point out that women are 53% more likely to be stressed at work than men. You point out that only 1 in 3 men in the world, beg your pardon, 1 in 3 women in the world lack access to safe toilets, even toilet queues. We laugh about toilet queues, but actually that's a very evident example of discrimination. And then Chummo here says, oh yeah, but the Prime Minister's a woman, so shut up and go away. Or words to that effect.
I love it when they include the Queen as if she's sort of had to strive really hard and overcome barriers.
I'm told that her forthcoming memoir will be called My Struggle.
Right. The Queen was always going to become Queen. Well, what's the abdication. Anyway, I just... when was
because the
that
Queen
text?
comes up as another example. So there are women on banknotes.
Right, yeah, exactly. But I'd be interested to
Only
know
because
when that
she didn't
text
have a
was
brother.
when that text was sent. Was it
well,
before
about
we were
4
talking
minutes
about the
ago.
car crash test dummies?
I don't know.
Just because I think that my hope in writing this book is to present these facts that unless you're a sociopath, right, you don't want your mum getting into a car that is designed for men and therefore she's 17% more likely to die than you are if she's in a car crash, right?
Yes.
You don't want your mum to die from a heart attack because all the diagnostic tests and the way we think about symptoms and a lot of the treatment is designed around male bodies. So this is about, if you have any woman in your life that you care about this. And the argument that, Theresa May happens to be Prime Minister because all the other candidates blew themselves up is just not really an effective argument against women dying in car crashes.